Hi, everybody. Jim Ostrowski with the Liberty Moving Podcast. Just wanted to give you some quick thoughts on Kamala Harris. So, first of all, never been a fan of her as a candidate. I thought they should have picked Susan Rice. I don't know all the background about whether Susan Rice is being investigated for Russian collusion, that kind of thing. The Son's apparently likes Trump. I think that could have been massaged. But all that aside, heads and shoulders ahead of Kamala. It just makes me question the political savvy of the Bush team. I never really saw her as a great candidate for president. So I make a lot of predictions on Facebook. My record is pretty good. And on December 6th of 2019, I gave her 0% chance to win the nomination. This was at a time when the mainstream media was touting her, and she was a bunch of people's favorite to win the nomination. By the way, I pretty much called the Democratic process. I had pretty much Biden, Warren, and then two long shots, Klobuchar and Gabbard. And minus Sanders, who's a special case, those were actually the last four survivors. I think I had Biden in the lead, except for one list where I had him second because he was sort of fading badly at a certain point. So, and there's a bunch of candidates, I'm not going to rattle them off, including Sanders and all the other ones basically that I never gave a chance to. So I have a pretty good track record as far as the horse race aspect of politics. And what I try to tell people is there's a lot of political analysis in my books. And if you want to know, if I know what I'm talking about when I'm analyzing sort of, real politic, I do, because I've been doing it for 50 years. So a couple things about Kamala that you're not hearing. First of all, she's a boomer, which is, it's just kind of funny that they didn't mention that because it's kind of a big deal in our society. The boomers have been dominating the news since the 60s. So obviously they didn't mention it because they're trying to make her sound young on a very old ticket. And they didn't want anybody to think boomer, oh my God, she could be 70, in theory. So just something that didn't come up. She's like Obama. She never had a real job. I've looked. I even looked for summer jobs that she had in college, because most people have had really nasty jobs, and she might have. But in terms of the record, in terms of her own Wikipedia, whatever, there's nothing on there. The summer job that she had was working in Senator Cranston's office. I mean, that's hardly washing dishes in a hot kitchen, like one of the jobs I had when I was in high school. So the significance of that is that it kind of fits into her whole persona. So basically her whole life she's had a tax supported job that she got through something other than pure marketplace merit. And in the job that she was in, she had no particular reason to want to figure out, in the marketplace, figure out what people want and give them what they want, and that's how you get along. So in the process of the marketplace, which has been obviously distorted by leftists, it inculcates an attitude of trying to understand people, trying to understand what they want, giving them what they want, instead of just serving your own sort of self-interest. Now, when you're a bureaucrat politician, you can do that. You have your relationship with other humans is based on force and coercion, and you can have your way with them. And that I think has shaped her persona, which I'll get into a little bit more. This whole issue of is she a progressive, is she a leftist, is she a moderate, all this nonsense. It's just a confusion, and I think I can get to the heart of this. If not, I'll clean it up in future podcasts. But so she's was, took a hard line on some law enforcement issues, but, a lot of that was just to get elected, to maintain her power in the rough and tumble world of California politics. But ideologically, she's a left progressive. There's just no question about that. On a wide range of issues, she's a left progressive. And it's not necessarily inconsistent with a tough law enforcement stance, because really what is left progressivism but two sort of mindsets that I've written about. I wrote a book about one, I'm writing a book about the other. There's two mindsets that lead the left progressive to want to get power and force their will on other people. So there's nothing particularly inconsistent with being a tough prosecutor on marijuana, particularly truancy laws, things of that guns. I'm sure she was very hard line on guns. None of that's inconsistent with being a left progressive. In fact, the left progressive world is based on, we need more laws because each one of these laws is going to move us closer to nirvana, or in the case of the leftist, we're going to screw our enemies, those rich people or those other people that they're causing us to be unhappy, and we're gonna show them when we get into power. So this whole apparent contradiction between her left progressive record in the Senate, I guess she's the fourth most left progressive, whatever, and sort of a tough law enforcement stance, it's more apparent than real. And I think those aspects where she might have been a little ruthless, some of the things, frankly, somebody pointed out there's 1,000 lawyers in that office. I don't think she knew everything that was really going on. But any of the sort of tough law enforcement stuff can be easily explained by the fact she's a very ruthless, power-hungry politician. And she's going to do what it takes to win that next election. If appearing tough on crime is going to do that, she's going to do that. But she's going to do what needs to win so she can get into office, so she can go on to push the left progressive agenda on substantive issues. We'll get into a couple of those examples. So another little factoid that you're not really hearing, and the whole point of this podcast, by the way, is the reason why you should listen to the podcast, and I'm not telling you not to listen to anybody else's, because I listen to dozens of them, frankly. Some I'll admit to, and some I won't. I listen to everybody, because if I don't listen to everybody, why would you listen to me? What do I know? If I don't know what the extreme left is doing, if I don't know what the extreme right is doing, if I don't know what the center is doing, don't listen to me, because I don't know what I'm talking about. I listen to everybody. But you're going to hear things, pretty much every show you're going to hear things that you're not hearing anywhere else, period. So her sister works for MSNBC. Has that been, it's not a secret. I guess it's there somewhere, but it's not being certainly emphasized, and it certainly explains why MSNBC has become like an infomercial for Kamala Harris. So she is as I said, she is a hard left progressive. Let's be clear about that. And just a couple more random comments. I'm not going to belabor this whole point, but there's been rioting in America, obviously, for several months, and has Kamala Harris said anything about the riots, anything about the looting? Now, you may say, well, no Democrats have. It's true, no Democrats have. Biden hasn't. But still, that's a pretty significant thing. It's the biggest story in the country, along with the government virus of the last few months. And I don't know, I was just looking this morning, there's 1,500 buildings damaged in Minneapolis. There's the federal courthouse under siege out west for like 2-3 months, and not one word of expressing an opinion. So I guess that speaks for itself. She's a major league gun grabber, She talked about an executive order to grab your, quote, assault rifle. Now, assault rifle is a propaganda term. It's not a scientific term. To the extent it's a scientific term or a special term, it refers to like a military type automatic weapon. But that's not what she's talking about. So basically, when a progressive talks about an assault rifle, they mean a semi-automatic. They want to take your semi-automatic away and put you back to, I don't know, my father carried a bolt-action rifle in World War II. They've been around a real long time. I'm not expert in the history of guns, but they want to limit you to a fairly primitive gun, and then they'll take that away too when they're ready to do so. So why the obsession with semi-automatics? Well, they're really not used in crime as much as various other types of guns that they don't talk about as much, which shows that this isn't about crime. This is about going after the core functions of the Second Amendment. They don't like the Second Amendment. I wrote a book called The Second Amendment Works. It's on Amazon. It's also free for downloading at Steve Filano's site, 2anys.com. So the point of the Second Amendment is to deter government tyranny and lots of collateral purposes, to make sure that you still have elections. Like I said in the Second Circuit a year and a half ago, judges, you can have elections, that's fine. You don't need the guns. What if they cancel the election? Now that's actually happened many, many times in history, usually in a country without the right to bear arms. So she's targeting the core purpose of the Second Amendment. The left progressive hates the Second Amendment because their main tool in politics is force, centralized, monopolized force, and they certainly don't want to disperse force among the population. Is the exact point of the Second Amendment. Also the exact point of the original purpose of juries. The founders realized the idea of not having a government wasn't even in currency in 1776, but they understood government was a monopoly. It's a very dangerous thing, and we want to disperse some of that power through the citizenry, through mainly juries and the right to bear arms. The left progressive doesn't believe in that at all. They love the all-powerful, almighty, centralized, coercive state. So Kamala Harris is a very, very dangerous gun grabber. And by the way, try this out. They'll say, well, she doesn't want to take all your guns. Well, can we have that in writing? Like every time there's a gun control proposal in the last 50 years, 60 years, do they ever say, that's it, we're done? We promise, this is the very last? No. Because as I explained in Progressivism, a primer, I broke progressivism down into 8 elements. Easily digestible, easy to understand, and all very important. Progressivism has no limiting principle. They're never going to be done with gun control. They're always going to be grabbing your gun until all you have is a pea shooter. So a couple other quick points. She totally pro-union. A union is a group of workers who seek government monopoly power. Why? To raise their income, to raise their wages at the expense. You can't just raise wages because there's laws of economics. They raise wages. They do raise wages. That I think everybody concedes that. They raise them at the expense of all non-union workers because there's fewer dollars bidding for non-union labor. So basically, a union is an organization that hurts everybody in society except the union members. She's totally pro-union, as a progressive would be, a left progressive. Totally for socialized medicine. Totally for, global, climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it. It's a big excuse for the exercise of totalitarian power. There's no limit to it. It's the fantasy of every progressive to have a policy rationalization, kind of like the government virus, that has no limits in terms of what, if you concede that this is the government's job to solve this problem, there's no limits on what they can do. They could actually, joke about it. They could regulate how much you exhale every minute. Loves taxes is one of the worst ratings from one of the tax organizations. Loves public housing. Public housing is a massive failure of progressivism. Nobody wants to live in public housing. It sucks. And the solution to the problem of housing is that the government should get the hell out of the way and allow the marketplace to provide low-income housing, which you could do very easily. You got rid of all the government regulations. The other solution is to get the government out of the economy so that they wouldn't make it extremely difficult to hire a low-skilled person just coming into the marketplace, so that person never gets the first rung, and they end up selling marijuana or stolen car parts, and they never get in the economy. Plus, for people who do have a current job or will under a better system of liberty, the government, my estimate is, and all the million-dollar think tanks in Washington, I don't know why they haven't done this work. And by the way, none of them put together a list of the 100 freest counties. I did, working out of my world headquarters in North Buffalo. That's at libertymoving.org. But my estimate is, it's not a question of like how much money the government takes out of a worker's salary, although I'm working on a rather huge project about that, which we'll be rolling out shortly. It's more like out of the wealth a worker produces, how much is the government like basically either stealing or destroying? And I would estimate about 80%, ballpark figure, until one of the think tanks gives me $1 million grant, and I'll put a team together, and I actually will crunch that number because I'm pretty good at crunching numbers. So current solution to public housing: give it to the people who live in it. Just give it to them. Call it reparations for progressivism. Get that stuff into the private sector. Give those people some net worth, some equity, a stake in owning something, and just get the government completely out of it, or just sell the stuff, whatever. It's a horrible place to live. So totally pro daycare. We've seen, first time in human history in the last like 20, 30 years, where no longer children are no longer raised, young children are no longer raised by their parents, or at least one parent. Now both parents, in order to pay for the destruction of wealth of the progressive big government, as I already just stated, about 80%. Now the woman or the man has to work. Both people have to work, and you dump your kids in this daycare. It's not good for kids. And guess what? I call it the daycare generation, an American tragedy. It's another one of my books that I'm working on. And you see these kids in the street. If you think you can explain these crazy people in the streets by, oh, it's social justice or some malarkey like that. No, these people are they're just like really miserable people working out their, unhappiness through phony political ideologies. Oh, I just gave a thesis of another future book away. So one last point, and this applies to a lot of people, but she's obviously on immigration, basically open borders. So I think whatever your position on immigration is, and I have a position that I've stated in the previous podcast, actually, very clearly, I call it International Easy Pass. But if you're running for president, it seems to me you should ask this question. I call it the Ostrowski question because I invented it. There's it's hard to keep track of the number of people in the world because it seems to bump up by like a tenth of a billion each month. Let's say, just for example, that minus the U.S., there's about 7 billion people in the world. There's a couple 100,000 more than that. A couple 100 million, actually, but whatever. Let's say there's 7 billion. So here's the Ostrowski question. You're running for president. Immigration's an issue. citizenship's an issue. Here's the question. Out of the 7 billion people in the world, which of them would you allow to become a U.S. citizen tomorrow? I think that's a fair question. Don't beat me up. I'm just asking the question. Trump's position is not many. He wants to reduce illegal immigration to zero, and he wants to reduce legal immigration by some significant factor. I don't know what the numbers is. I don't really care that much. What's Kamala Harris's position? As far as I know, through a casual, bit of research on it, I have not seen. She criticizes Trump's policy. She talks about DACA and all the obvious Democratic talking points. I have not seen her say anything about that she would stop any of the 7 billion people on the planet from becoming U.S. citizens, either today, tomorrow, next year, whatever. So that's as much as I can tell about her position on immigration. So that's pretty much it. I don't want to belabor this. Overall, I think it's a bad choice. I think it helps Trump on top of Trump's payroll tax, a brilliant Machiavellian maneuver. It's the subject of my previous podcast. Please subscribe. I need 1,000 subscribers in order to get taken seriously by Internetville and YouTube itself. What's the point of the podcast? I'll keep repeating this until I'm into my 50th episode. You're going to hear things here that you don't hear anywhere else. There's no man behind the curtain. I'm going to give it to you straight. I'm not running for office. I don't really care. And my skill set, which is 37 years as a lawyer, 50 years of political activism of every conceivable type you could possibly imagine, and 40 years of being a policy writer, author of 7 books. So you're going to hear an analysis and actually some facts, as you've heard today, that you're not going to hear on any of the podcasts. Not to trash them. I don't live in an echo chamber. Listen to a lot of people, read everything, watch a lot of things. That's what I do. So over and out. I'll be with you again probably tomorrow on some other new developments. Jim Ostrowski from the Liberty Moving Podcast, Buffalo, New York.